The heat of King's Landing clung to the air like a warning, thick and unnatural for a city that was supposed to be the heart of the realm. Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, had never felt more out of place. His northern blood rejected the gold and corruption that dripped from every corner of the capital, and now he was a hunted man. The betrayal came earlier than he expected. It was Varys, of all people, who whispered the truth. "You're not safe, Lord Stark. The Queen knows everything. She's moving against you even now." Ned didn't trust the spider, but something in the eunuch's eyes that night, something close to fear, forced him to listen. Hours later, he was slipping out through a passage hidden beneath the Tower of the Hand, a black cloak around his shoulders and a blade he hoped he wouldn't have to use strapped beneath it. He left behind a broken parchment, never signed. His confession. It was not honor that guided him this time, but his children, his daughters, Sansa, caught in the poisonous web of courtly lies, and Arya. Gods only knew where she was. The rest were back home in Winterfell, vulnerable and far, beyond his reach. He had to survive. For them, outside the city walls, chaos brewed. The gold cloaks had orders to seize him on sight. He saw their torches flickering like a slow-moving snake along the outer roads. His horse, a black gelding gifted by Sir Barristan long ago, carried him through the dark like a whisper. South wasn't an option. The Queen's allies stretched all the way to Highgarden. East would lead him toward the sea and into more Lannister-controlled ports. That left only one path, north. But between him and home was a land teeming with enemies, broken loyalties, and the weight of his own decisions. Every man he passed could be a bounty hunter, every village could be a trap, and Cersei, she would not tolerate failure. She would retaliate. Indeed, word travelled fast. By the second night, wanted posters with his name started appearing in taverns. Treason, they claimed, conspiracy to usurp the throne. He was no longer the hand of the king. He was a traitor. Ned stopped trusting the stars after the third day. Too many eyes watched the skies, and too many birds flew with scrolls carrying his name. He avoided roads, choosing instead the animal, tracks and forgotten hunting trails. He thought of Robert, his old friend, dead because of the same queen he now fled. He thought of Littlefinger and how easily he'd played the game Ned never wanted to be part of. But what cut deepest was how close he came to doing the honorable thing, and how that might have killed him. On the fifth day, he reached an old abandoned holdfast on the edge of the Riverlands. There, under the veil of midnight, he found a face he never expected, Jorah Mormont, exiled, hardened, drunk, but not dead. "Stark," Jorah muttered, eyeing him through the smoke of a dying fire. "Didn't expect to see you this far from your frozen castle." "I didn't expect to live long enough to see you again," Ned answered, lowering his hood. The two men sat in silence, both carrying ghosts neither could bury. Jorah, disgraced from Bear Island, and Ned, betrayed by a kingdom he once swore to protect. It was strange, almost funny in the cruelest way possible, how both men had been banished by their own choices. "What now?" Jorah finally asked, poking. "The coals." Ned looked into the fire, eyes weary. "I ride north. I have to get back to my sons, my daughters. I have to warn Robb. War is coming." Jorah stared at him for a long time, then nodded once. "Then you'll need someone who knows how to survive being hunted." It wasn't an alliance born of trust. It was survival. And survival, Ned Stark now understood, was a blood-soaked business. They traveled by night. Jorah was right. Ned had no idea how to move like a fugitive. Every time he heard a rustle in the brush, his hand went to his sword, and every village they passed through, he scanned for Lannister colors. But Jorah knew how to vanish. He taught Ned to walk slower when nervous, not faster, to wear dirt and mud on his face so no one would recognize the Lord under the filth. And above all, he taught him when to speak and when to say nothing at all. The deeper they rode into the riverlands, the more chaos they found. Farms were burning. Raiders, some in Lannister armor, some not, pillaged freely. No one trusted anyone anymore. "The king is dead," someone told them at a tavern. "The realm's breaking, and no one's holding it together." King Robert's death was no surprise to Ned, but the swiftness with which the realm began tearing itself apart chilled him to the bone. That night, over stale bread and bitter ale, Jorah said what Ned had been trying not to. "They'll name your son a rebel before he even marches. If the queen thinks you live, she'll take Winterfell as vengeance." Ned didn't answer. He simply stared into the fire. The thought of Cersei's banners flying over Winterfell made something twist in his chest, something colder than fear. By the 10th day, Arya found them. She wasn't supposed to. She was supposed to be hidden, far from the filth and smoke, but Arya Stark had never been one to stay put. Dressed in rags, her hair hacked short, a stolen dagger on her hip, she burst into their camp in the middle of the night, growling like a wild thing. Ned almost didn't recognize her. "Father," she whispered, and that's when he knew she had seen too much. Arya told them everything. About how she'd escaped the Red Keep, how she'd seen Sir Meryn Trant beat Syrio Forel to the ground, how she'd killed a boy, one of the stable hands, just to get away. Her voice didn't crack when she said it. Her eyes didn't water. She was only 9. Ned held her for a long time, silent, while Jorah looked away out of some grim respect. Now they were 3. It slowed them down, but Ned wouldn't leave her. They stole another horse, left coin behind, and made their way north along a half-ruined road that hadn't seen patrols in weeks. Every mile was a gamble. They avoided crossroads, followed the sound of river water, and slept in barns if they could find them. One morning, while passing a group of refugees heading south, Arya pointed at a broken cartwheel and asked, "Why are they going the wrong way?" Jorah didn't answer, but Ned knew. South was where the lions ruled. It was cruel, but for some safer to kneel than to fight. That night they stumbled upon a camp of Frey men. Jorah whispered it first. "We walk into that camp, we die." "Not if they think I'm dead already," Ned said. Jorah looked at him, puzzled. "You want them to think you're someone else?" "No," Ned replied. "I want them to think I'm no one." He gave Jorah and Arya instructions. Then he dismounted, walked into the torchlight, and knelt before the Frey guards with a limp in his step and a fake name on his lips. "Name's Ed," he told them. "Washed out night, looking for coin." The lie stuck, barely. The Freys weren't sharp men, drunk, bitter, and too focused on licking Tywin Lannister's boots. They grunted and waved him through. Ned stayed in the camp one night, gathering what he could. He listened, and he learned something that made his blood freeze. The Lannisters were already marching, not just on the riverlands. On the north, they would use Ned's treason to justify everything, to crush Robb before he could raise his banners, to take the wolves' heads and mount them on the gates of Winterfell. And worse. Sansa was still in the Red Keep. Cersei would use her, bait. Ned knew then. Going home wasn't enough. He had to stop a war, or start one on his own terms. The sky cracked with thunder as Ned Stark crossed into the neck. Rain poured in thick sheets, soaking the marshland and masking their trail. It was both a blessing and a curse, slowing the Lannister scouts but turning the roads to slop. Every hoofstep was a battle, every mile earned with sweat and strain. Arya's face was streaked with mud. She didn't complain. She hadn't since that first night. She was becoming more wolf than girl. Jorah, for his part, remained silent as they travelled, his eyes sharp, always scanning the horizon. "You're a dead man walking," he said once when they made camp near an old stone cairn. "You know that, don't you?" "I know," Ned replied, "but if I can reach Moat Cailin, Robb will hear me. He'll hold his banners. He won't walk into the trap." Jorah had doubts. Ned could see them in his eyes, but he didn't say more. Moat Cailin was 2 days ahead. They were close now. Too close. That night, Ned dreamed of Winterfell, of the Godswood, of the old red-eyed weirwood watching him in silence. He saw his boys, Robb at the head of the table, Jon snow-drenched and silent, Bran climbing the towers. Then the vision darkened, and a lion's paw crushed the halls in flame. The dream ended with the sound of Sansa's voice screaming his name through the dark. He woke before dawn, breath caught in his throat. They moved early, passing through ghost villages where children hid in cellars and mothers clutched knives like they were steel swords. Vir ruled the realm now. Crows followed them, waiting for death. Then came the sound of hooves. At first, just one rider, then 2, then 10. Jorah hissed. "Scouts!" They rode fast, leaving their gear behind. Arya clung to her father, small, hands wrapped tight around his cloak as the wind slapped at them. Jorah led the way, veering into the swamp trails, where trees bent low and fog danced between the reeds. But the riders were fast, and they weren't mere scouts. They were Lannister men. 2 peeled off and cut through the trees, trying to flank them. Ned shouted, "Split!" and turned left, riding into the marsh. He heard Arya scream behind him as the horse skidded in the muck, nearly toppling. He reached back, gripped her arm, kept her steady. An arrow whistled past his ear. They couldn't outrun them. Jorah's voice rang out from the trees. To me, they converged in a clearing near the base of an old stone tower, half swallowed by the swamp. Jorah dismounted, sword already drawn. Ned handed Arya off to him, then drew ice, his ancient greatsword, gleaming wet in the rain. The first Lannister man rode in hard. Ned met him in the mud, swinging wide and low, catching the horse's leg. The beast screamed and went down hard, rider crushed beneath it. Another came from the side. Ned barely turned in time, his blade scraping off armor. Jorah moved, like a shadow, cutting one down with a dagger to the throat, but there were too many. Arya had taken up a fallen dagger, crouched behind the stones, eyes wild. She looked ready to kill again. Then the horn blew, a deep, slow hroom from the trees. Not Lannister, not Frey, Northmen. Banners crested the ridge, grey direwolves on white, flapping in the rain. Robb Stark had arrived. The Lannisters faltered. One fled and was cut down. The rest fell back as the Northmen poured into the clearing like a storm. Ned dropped to his knees, breath ragged, sword dripping red. A horse stopped before him. He looked up and for a moment thought he was seeing things. Robb, older, harder, face weathered by war, but still his son. "Father," Robb said, voice low with disbelief. "They said you were dead." Ned stared at him, eyes filled with something too heavy to speak. Not yet. Behind Robb rode a boy with sharp eyes and a direwolf at his heel. Jon Snow. He dismounted silently, then pulled Arya into a tight hug. Neither of them spoke, but Arya didn't let go for a long time. Later, inside the half-ruined tower, with a fire burning and the Lannister dead being piled outside, Ned told them everything. About the Queen, about the betrayal, about Sansa, still a prisoner, about the war coming, fast and ruthless, about how Cersei would stop at nothing to end their line. Robb's face changed as he listened. The boy was gone. What remained was a wolf with a crown in his eyes. "She wants a war," Robb said coldly. Ned nodded. "Then we give her one." The war began before they even reached the neck. Robb's scouts returned with grim news. Tywin Lannister's host was already marching on the Riverlands, burning Tully lands as they went. Walder Frey had yet to declare, waiting like a vulture, to see which side bled more. And in King's Landing, Queen Cersei had announced that Eddard Stark had been executed for treason, using a body double paraded through the streets, head on a spike, to appease the crowd and shut up the whispers. The South believed Ned Stark was dead, and now Ned had a weapon more powerful than any blade. A lie. "We use it," Jorah urged, during a war council in the swamps. "You're already a ghost. Let the lions keep thinking that. Move in the shadows, hit where it hurts." Robb was uncertain. He's my father. He shouldn't have to hide like some coward. He's not hiding, Jon said from the corner of the tent, voice low. He's hunting. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Ned would disappear. No more lord's armor, no greatsword, no sigil to draw attention. He would become a rumor, a whisper in the trees. Let the Lannisters think they'd killed him. Let them grow arrogant, complacent, and when the wolf bit back, it would be from the throat. As the Northmen made camp near the ruins of Moat Cailin, ravens were sent to every bannerman. "The young wolf calls," the message read. "The South has broken faith. Ride with us or fall alone." Ned stayed behind the scenes, his face unseen. He trained with Arya during the day, teaching her the sword, yes, but also discipline, patience, not just how to stab, but when. She was fast, reckless, angry, but she listened to her father now in a way she hadn't before. "She's changing," Jon told him one night. "They all will," Ned replied. "War does that." By the third week, bannermen from House Manderley, Umber, and Karstark had arrived. The North was waking up, and so was the enemy. Catelyn Stark arrived with grim news. Sansa was being used as a puppet, reading forced messages, claiming her father confessed, calling her brother a traitor. But worse, Renly Baratheon had claimed the throne. Stannis had raised his banners, and the entire realm was splitting apart like dry wood. "They're calling it the War of Five Kings," she said bitterly. "And all of them are too busy grasping for crowns to see what's coming." Robb made his decision that night. "We march," he said. "We break the Riverland siege, drive the lions back to their den, and then we take Sansa back." Catelyn looked to Ned. "And what of you?" "I'm already dead," Ned said, not unkindly. "Let the ghost do what the living can't." The first strike came swift and bloody. A Lannister supply convoy, 50 strong, was ambushed in a forest clearing by what they thought were brigands. It wasn't. Ned led the strike himself, cloaked, helmeted, merciless. No survivors, no messages left. Just one mark burned into the side of a cart, a direwolf's claw. Rumors spread fast after that. Whispers in camps and cities. Eddard Stark haunts the Riverlands. They say the North sent a wraith, armored in shadow. Every man who wronged House Stark dies choking on his own blood. It was working. The Lannisters were looking over their shoulders now, guards doubled, travel restricted. They started seeing ghosts in every shadow. But there was a price. In Harrenhal, Gregor Clegane retaliated. He took 2 villages, burned them to ash, women and children alike. Ned learned of it the next day. He said nothing, just stared into the flames that night, jaw clenched. Jorah approached him quietly. "We're in it now, Ned. No more honor, no more mercy." Ned nodded slowly. "Then we end it, fast." Arya sharpened her blade nearby, silent. The final raven arrived at midnight. Lord Hoster Tully had pledged his full support. Riverrun was holding. The Riverlands would not fall without a fight. The wolf pack was ready, and the ghost of Eddard Stark would lead the charge from the dark. It began with a storm, not one from the skies, but from steel, fire, and northern rage. Robb Stark's army struck the Lannister siege at Riverrun like a hammer, swift, brutal, and with no warning. The Lannisters, confident in their numbers and tired from days of burning the countryside, weren't prepared for the fury of wolves in the night. But the real terror wasn't the charging spearmen or the hail of arrows. It was the man they thought already dead. Eddard Stark moved like a phantom through the chaos. Cloaked in black, face hidden beneath a dented helm, he cut down knights and squires without a word. They didn't know him, not until it was too late. A few tried to beg, to claim they were only following orders. He didn't stop for them. The two. Ghost didn't speak. By dawn, Riverrun's gates opened and the siege broke. The banners of House Tully and Stark flew together once more, and the Riverlands, though wounded, still stood. Inside the castle walls, Ned held his brother-in-law, Lord Hoster Tully, whose illness had left him gaunt and weak. Hoster coughed blood. When he spoke, but his mind was sharp. I heard, "They killed you." "They tried," Ned replied. Hoster chuckled bitterly. "The lions won't sleep well now." News of Ned's survival spread faster than they expected, faster than they wanted. The ghost had become real, and that made him dangerous. The Lannisters put a price on his head so high that even northern houses with wavering loyalties began to flinch. Some wanted him to go into hiding again, but Robb wouldn't have it. "They need to see him," he told the bannerman. Alive, defiant, the lion showed his teeth. Now the wolf bares his throat and dares him to bite. Ned stood before thousands, weathered and blood-stained, his presence silent but commanding. It gave the soldiers more than just hope. It gave them purpose. Meanwhile, in the shadows of River Run, Catelyn brought him a sealed message from Kings. Lending Sansa's handwriting, "Father, they say you are dead. But I pray each night that it is not true. The Queen makes me say terrible things. Please, if you are alive, come for me. Please, I am so afraid." The words felt like cold iron against Ned's ribs. "She's bait," Catelyn said quietly. "Cersei knows she failed. She's using your daughter to bring you back in chains." "I'm not going back in chains," Ned answered, voice low. "I'm bringing a noose." Arya heard them speak, standing just behind the tent's flap. She clutched her dagger tighter that night and didn't sleep at all. Jon Snow had taken up his place at Robb's side, not just as brother, but as protector. His direwolf, Ghost, haunted the night, just like his namesake. The soldiers whispered that Jon never smiled now, that he spoke little, and when he did, it was usually a warning. Something in him had changed since seeing his father again. A hardness, a purpose. That night, Ned met Jon alone, atop River Run's highest tower. "You never asked where I came." "Oh, from," Jon said, eyes on the stars. "I never needed to," Ned replied. "But now you do." Jon turned to face him, jaw clenched. "I'm not your son, am I?" Ned didn't speak for a long time. The wind howled around them. "No," he said finally, "you're not." Jon nodded once. He didn't seem angry, just resolved. "Does Robb know?" "No. And he mustn't. Not yet." Jon's voice was quiet, sharp. "Then tell me this. Am I Stark, or am I something else?" Ned looked at him, really looked. "You're my blood. You're more Stark than many who carry the name." Jon didn't look satisfied, but he didn't press further. They both knew a greater truth was looming. As the Stark host regrouped, ravens flew again, this time not in warning but in declaration. The North would not kneel. They were not marching to King's Landing for peace or treaties. They were marching for vengeance. Word came then from a spy in the capital, Littlefinger, always playing every side. He had information, a secret path into the Red Keep, a way to get to Sansa quietly, but he wanted something in return. Jorah read the message aloud. "Petyr Baelish offers a door into the lion's den. All he asks is that Lord Stark listen to a proposition in person." Robb was furious. "He's filth. He betrayed you once. He'll do it again." "He will," Ned agreed. "But not before we use him." Jorah looked to Ned. "You mean to go to King's Landing?" Ned nodded. "Alone." King's Landing stank of rot. It wasn't the fish from the harbour or the sewage running through Flea Bottom. It was the smell of decay beneath the gold. The throne sat high and proud, but the city below festered with fear, hunger, and whispers of war. Every alley echoed with rumours, and one rumour was louder than the rest. Eddard Stark lives. The Queen denied it, of course. She called it northern treachery, rebel lies. She ordered the tongues cut from those who said it too loudly. But even she couldn't kill the shadow of a man everyone swore they saw die. Especially now, when whispers said that Shadow had crossed the river again. Ned Stark entered the city under a moonless sky, disguised in rags, reeking like every other beggar who passed the gates. Only 3 people knew he was coming: Jorah, Arya, and the spider who started it all, Varys. He hadn't trusted the eunuch before. He didn't trust him now. But Varys had a way of appearing just when he was needed most. "This is madness," Jorah had warned before they parted ways outside the city. "One wrong step, you'll be a head on a spike for real this time." Ned simply said, "Then I'll finally be at peace." But it wasn't peace he was after. He wanted his daughter, and blood. Littlefinger met him in a brothel. Of course he did. The man was smiling when Ned walked in, though the shadows under his eyes betrayed the fear behind his arrogance. "Lord Stark," he drawled, swirling wine in his cup. "You look terrible. And you still look like a man I should have killed the first time," Ned replied flatly. Petter Baelish laughed, but his fingers twitched. He laid out his proposal quickly. Help Ned slip into the Red Keep through a forgotten tunnel beneath the dungeons. In return, Baelish wanted Harrenhal and the promise of safety when the North took King's Landing. "You'll die before you ever sit on a throne," Ned said coldly. Littlefinger didn't argue. He just smiled again. "Maybe, but I'd rather die with a castle to my name than in a gutter." They struck no deal. But the tunnel was real, and that was all Ned needed. That night he passed through the same halls where he'd once walked with honor. Now he was a shadow in the dark, stepping over rat bones and whispering ghosts. The keep hadn't changed. It still reeked of polished lies, but he had. He reached Sansa's chamber after midnight. She didn't recognize him at first. Her face went pale, her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Shh," he said, pulling her close. "It's me, you're safe." Sansa clung to him with shaking hands. "They said you were dead. They made me say you were a traitor." "You did what you had to," he whispered. She cried silently. When he looked into her eyes, he didn't see a child anymore. He saw a prisoner who had learned how to smile through her chains. He wanted to take her and run that very moment. But there was one more thing he needed to do. The throne room. He found it empty, save for the Iron Throne itself, cold, jagged, and waiting. He stared at it a long time. So many had died for it, lied for it, killed for it. He'd never wanted it. But now, standing there in the dead of night, he made a vow to the ghosts watching. "If this war takes my name, my home, and my blood, then I will bury that throne beneath the corpses it created." He turned to leave and found a boy waiting in the doorway, Tommen, the last innocent Lannister. Ned froze. The child blinked at him, puzzled. "You're the man from the picture," Tommen said softly. "The one Mama says was bad." Ned knelt, met the boy's eyes. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Then why are you here? To fix a lie?" Tommen frowned, confused, but then he nodded. "Okay, I won't tell." Ned stood and walked past the boy, heart heavy. He knew what was coming. Tommen didn't deserve it, but innocence was always the first casualty of power. By dawn, they were gone. Sansa rode north, escorted by northern spies planted by Varys. Ned slipped out through the same tunnel, bloodied and silent. And behind him, King's Landing woke to a new kind of fear. A northern rider had nailed a banner to the Red Keep's gates, a simple wolf black against white. Below it, a message scrawled in ash, "The North remembers." The message shattered the illusion. King's Landing had pretended for weeks that Eddard Stark was dead, that the North would break without him, that the lions ruled alone. But when the direwolf banner appeared nailed to the gates of the Red Keep, panic spread like wildfire through the court. The Queen raged behind closed doors. "He's alive," she spat, shattering a goblet across the floor. "That northern bastard is alive." Her council stood silent, too afraid to speak, too stunned to act. Even Pycelle looked shaken, his lips trembling. It was Lord Tywin who sent the next order. "Bring me the Stark's head. The real one." But the city already knew. The whispers were louder than steel. "The North remembers," they said in corners and alleys. "He was here. He walked among us." Some claimed to have seen his ghost. Others swore he visited the Sept of Baelor and spit on the very ground where they once knelt. The truth, no longer mattered. The fear did. Back in the Riverlands, Ned Stark didn't stop moving. He rode hard toward the twins with Jorah and a dozen hand-picked riders, Arya among them. She refused to be left behind, and no one, not even her father, could break her resolve now. War is war, she said coldly, wiping her dagger clean. I'm not a little girl anymore. Ned saw it too. The child who chased cats and mocked Septa Mordain was gone. In her place was a wolf with no collar. When they reached the twins, Walder Frey was waiting. The old man oozed smugness, seated on his throne of damp oak and surrounded by 20 of his pale, twitchy sons. So the dead Lord Stark returns, he said, smiling like a vulture with bloody feathers. Quite the miracle. I'm not here to kneel, Ned said, stepping forward. I'm here to warn you. Warn me? Frey snorted. I'm not the one being hunted? No, Ned said. You're the one being watched. Frey's smile faltered. The next time you sell northern blood to the lions, Ned continued, I will burn this bridge down with every Frey chained to its stones. Do you understand? Frey's eyes narrowed. And if I don't? Arya stepped beside her father, pulled a blade from her belt and threw it. It landed with a thunk, buried in the wood near Frey's hand. She didn't blink. Walder Frey swallowed hard. I think I do. The message was clear. The old alliances were dead. There were only wolves now, and those they didn't trust, they threatened. From there, the pack moved northward, rejoining Robb's army just outside the Neck. The young wolf had already pushed Tywin back from the Trident, his men bloodied but victorious. The war was shifting, and the realm could feel it, but there was no joy. Robb met his father at dawn. No words, just an embrace. A father and son once separated by betrayal, now reunited under blood and fire. We've won some battles, Robb said, but Cersei still wears the crown. We have to march south again. Ned shook his head. Not yet. We wait. We cut there. Roads burn their food, kill their scouts. We make them bleed for every inch. And Sansa? Robb asked. She's coming, Ned replied. She'll be home soon. But even as he spoke it, Ned knew home was far away now. The North had changed. So had his children. So had he. Later that night, around the fire, Jon Snow came to him. She told me, Jon said quietly. Your sister. She whispered it in a dream. Ned didn't ask how. He just nodded. She named me Aegon, Jon continued. Targaryen. I don't know what that means. I don't know what to do with it. You survive, Ned said. You protect the North. You keep our people safe. That's all that matters. Now. But what if the crown? No crown will save this realm. Ned interrupted, eyes fierce. It's just another throne for another tyrant. We've bled enough for kings. The people need justice, not rulers. Jon stood silent for a moment, then nodded. In that moment, they were no longer father and son, but soldier and heir. The last of the old world, staring into the jaws of the new. The next day, ravens flew again, one to Winterfell. Prepare the keep. The wolves are returning, one to Riverrun, hold the river. The lion is still hungry, and one to Castle Black, watch the wall. Something stirs beyond the frost, because even as the south burned in war, a colder shadow was moving in the north, and Eddard Stark, once dead, once broken, once betrayed, would be the only one who remembered what truly mattered, the north and winter. The wind howled across the battlements of Winterfell, colder than it should have been for that time of year. The kind of wind that carried omens. Ned Stark stood atop the walls, eyes scanning the horizon. Snow flurries danced in the air, soft but steady. The land was breathing in the first whispers of winter. He was home, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Winterfell had changed in his absence. The Great Hall had been repaired after the Ironborn's short-lived raid. The words, "Winter is coming," hung heavier now, not as a motto but as a warning etched into every stone. The people had seen too much, lost too much, and Ned had returned. Not as Warden of the North, but as a revenant, A ghost carrying fire, steel, and vengeance. He'd brought Arya back. He'd brought Sansa too. Pale, quiet, changed in ways no father should have to witness. But he hadn't brought peace. That night, the council gathered in the great hall. Robb, Jon, Catelyn, Maester Luwin, even Theon Greyjoy returned in chains. In silence, a prisoner rather than a brother, Jon stood at the head of the table now, beside Robb, no longer just the bastard. The truth of his name still burned quietly between them, but neither spoke of it aloud. "There are 3 wars now," Robb said. "The one we're fighting, the one we're avoiding, and the one we're too blind to see." Ned nodded. "The south bleeds while the wall is left weak, and in the east, Daenerys Targaryen raises dragons." "Then we pick our enemy," Jon said, "before they all choose us." They discussed alliances, strategy, supply lines, but none of it mattered if the North was not united. So Ned sent ravens, not of war, but of invitation. "Come to Winterfell. See the man they said was dead. See the family still standing." One by one the old houses answered, the Umbers, the Karstarks, the Glovers. Even reluctant Lord Wyman Manderley rode through the snow, fat and proud, and bearing banners of white and blue. They came not for politics. They came because they remembered what the South had done, what the Lannisters had taken, what the wolves had suffered. At the first great gathering in Winterfell since Robert's visit, the lords stood in silence as Ned entered the hall. No gold, no crown, just furs, snow-drenched boots, and a scar on his cheek that hadn't healed right. He stood before them not as a lord, not as a rebel, but as a father who had watched his world burn and still lived. "You came," he said simply. "I thank you. I called for unity, not war. War will come whether we want it or not, but we must choose what we're fighting for." He let that settle. "I no longer serve the throne," he said. "I no longer serve any king or queen. I serve the North, and I will not ask you to die for a crown." He looked at Robb, then Jon, then Arya, standing fierce in the shadows. "I will ask you to live for your families, for your lands, for the winter that is not a metaphor, but a storm on the edge of our world. We must be ready, not for the Lannisters, not even for dragons," he paused, "but for the dead." That changed the room. Men looked at each other with unease. The whispers from the wall, from wildlings who'd fled south before vanishing. They were no longer dismissed. Catelyn stood then, voice calm but iron-forged. "My husband has given you truth. You may not like it, but I've seen enough lies to know the difference." The North did not bend the knee. It bared its teeth. The next day, they began preparing not for a march, but for a siege. Grain was stored, walls reinforced, the forges of Winterfell lit with fire that never died. Sansa took over logistics, Arya trained younger girls in the courtyard. Jon rode north to Castle Black with Ghost, promising he would send word of what he found. Ned watched them all with quiet pride and sorrow. This was not the life he had wanted for them, but it was the life they had been given. On the final night, before the first deep snow, he stood in the godswood beneath the heart tree, its red leaves dancing in the wind. The old gods didn't answer his prayers. They never had, but he prayed anyway. He prayed that his children would live, that the North would endure, that the fire in their blood would not burn them from within. And when the first raven came from Castle Black, marked in black wax, sealed, with frost he opened it without fear. The words were few. "The dead march. We saw them. The wall will not hold." Ned read it in silence. Then without a word he turned to his bannermen. "Winter has come.